Welcome to the Barcelona Podcast, episode 144. Unmissable Opinions brought to you by the most influential voices in the FC Barcelona community. I'm Dan Hilton, and since it's the end of the club season, that means it's also time to take a look back at the year that was in La Masia with our resident La Masia expert, Navid Molaaghaei. Now, Navid, you're about to watch Denmark versus Georgia in a European qualifier, so not only do I really appreciate you taking the time, but it seems like you're in a park. That's what people are hearing in the background, but it seems to me that you're going to sound just great.
Yeah, thanks Dan. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I'm just sitting in a park with a view up the stadium. And yeah, no worries. There's loads of time left, so we can have a good discussion about this past season.
And I hope the ambient noise of children playing again remind you this is a La Masia special. That's what we're talking today for the entire time as we try to answer whose stock rose in La Masia. And obviously these are kids, these are teenagers, so we're not doing a whose stock fell or what players didn't really achieve what they wanted to achieve. Instead, we are going to be looking at the risers and guys that, again, with the greatest picture being that these talents someday make the first team. So with that little nugget in mind of which of these players will eventually not necessarily play alongside Messi, but play alongside, we're hoping, the likes of Molaaghaei and different guys like that. So I think the place to start here, again, before we get to Juvenil A, who finished second in the division with Real Zaragoza, or Juvenil B, Cadet A, Cadet B, they all finished first. Barcelona also semifinals in the UEFA Youth League, falling to Chelsea on penalty kicks. But again, those are lower levels. We're going to start with Barcelona B. And I know it's technically not La Masia, but it very much is still La Masia because it's made up largely of guys who went from Juvenil A and moved up to Barca B. That is the system that Barcelona have. And the name you have to start with, 19-year-old, about to be 20 in August, Riqui Puig. And Navid, I think people tend to get overexcited about Riqui Puig. But then again, I look at his body of work, and I actually look, even though Barca B did not get promoted back to the Segunda Division, they're going to be in the third division again next year. Riqui Puig, I think, hit all the boxes that you need to earn a spot in the first team next year.
Oh, definitely. He's been extraordinary, and it's been extremely obvious in pretty much every single game he's played. He hasn't played any like very bad games. I mean, he's always proven to have a level that is just above everyone else in terms of just pure quality. And he's from the first game, he's been leading the team on the pitch as well, which is not usual for a first team juvenile first year Barca B player, who is, I mean, he is physically smaller and weaker than everyone else, but one wouldn't think so. I mean, he's just dominant in every area of the game. His physique hasn't affected him that much this season. He took a few knocks throughout the season, but wasn't injured once. So he's had a perfect season in my opinion, and he's ready to promote to the first team. Actually, I would say.
I think that's actually the most important point, that the big knock on him, people say, is that he just doesn't have the physicality. And you talk about the low center of gravity that Messi and Iniesta and Xavi and guys like that have, and what, the comparisons you can make just because of the low center of gravity. But with his 7 assists this season, didn't have a goal in 32 appearances for Barca B, but he did play over 2,400 minutes. And as you mentioned, he missed 0 games due to injury. So for all the knocks he gets, for all the times that you can watch the highlights, he gets kicked to pieces. Yet he still has the resolve to either stay on his feet, which again is a quality that I think Culés love more than maybe anything else when we get excited about a prospect who stays on his feet and doesn't just roll around on the ground. That's something that we have pride in for La Masia talents, and Puig does that almost better than anybody else. And in his the assist he got, we think back to the Copa del Rey game when he gets the assist, and then the 2 La Liga appearances he made as well near the end of the season. Not only does Barcelona know about him and the rest of the world knows about him, but I think the next season, obviously, of his development is going to be huge. And the question isn't whether or not he's ready for a first team. It's whether or not Barca are going to carve out enough minutes for him next season. I think worst case scenario is he winds up at Barcelona's first team next year, doesn't really play much of anything, and then has to be loaned out to a club, and it just doesn't work out. I think this is the year where again, he's already ready for a first team. It's just whether or not he's going to get enough minutes to continue his ascent. So Riqui Puig is the guy that we start with, but he did have a bunch of teammates that had, we're going to say, mixed results. And again, I didn't want to be poo-poo on any of the Juvenile A or lower. But as far as Barca B, these are actual full professionals, and some had good seasons, some had bad seasons. And as far as, making the jumps to the first team, not all of these guys are going to do that next year. I don't know if any of the four will. The guys I'm going to throw at you here, Navid, are Juan Miranda, Oriol Busquets, who both should be out on loan next season. That's not me. That's, again, news seems to be that those two will be heading out. And then Abel Ruiz, who I don't know if anybody knows what's going to happen to him after he didn't really do much goal scoring. And he moved really out to the left wing a lot of the time for Barcelona B, where he's supposed to be a striker in the future. And then Iñaki Peña, who I think his fate really rests on whether or not Jasper Cillessen stays at the club this summer, and he's already shown that he is good enough to be the backup to Ter Stegen if given the opportunity. But again, will Barca do that, or will they just sign a cheap, experienced goalkeeper, say a Buffon, if you will? But for those four players, Navid, I'd love to hear where you think that they how they've done this season and where they project for next year.
All right, so let's start with from the back, like the goalkeeper, Iñaki Peña. He's again, just as Riqui Puig, it's been his first season at Barca B, and he's just been he's also been superb. In the beginning, he had to compete with Sarevic and Ezquieta for the spot, but I mean, after a month or so, he was regularly picked between the sticks by Pimienta, and he's been super good. I mean, he is perhaps a bit small for a goalkeeper, not small, but below average, I would say. But one wouldn't notice. I mean, he's been maybe the only room for improvement for him this season has been in the air on corners, where Barca B have conceded some goals, but that's also just due to bad defending in general. But he's been very good. Actually, people should check him out online, like find videos of him and stuff, because it's genuinely scary how much he resembles Ter Stegen. Mm-hmm. Like in the way he moves and in the way he passes the ball, and like just, I mean, in the way he makes his saves. He always sits very low and like makes these handball-esque saves, like we see Ter Stegen do. And he's very good on penalties. He saved 3 penalties this season, only conceded 1. I think he only conceded 1, but he saved 3 anyways. Mm-hmm. And he's been very, very good. I would definitely not be worried if he would be Ter Stegen's backup goalkeeper next season. I wouldn't be worried for the team. Perhaps I would be a bit worried for him if the only minutes he would get this season would be a handful of Copa del Rey matches.
Right.
A goalkeeper who's 20 years old perhaps should be playing more regularly, but he's definitely good enough to be with Barca's first team, I would say. So Juan Miranda, the left back, people might know him better because he's played some first team games both in preseason and throughout the season, maybe 3 or 4 appearances if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but that was at the fall as well. I want to make that clear that happened in the first half of the season, and we haven't heard a sniff of him since.
Yeah, and people have been very negatively surprised of him. The reactions haven't been positive, but no matter how he's played with the first team, he's been excellent with Barca B. Dominated the left side throughout the entire season, made plenty of assists, been extremely solid and disciplined for a left back his age, and it's not a coincidence that multiple La Liga and Bundesliga clubs are after him, and actually I think that it would actually be good for him to go out on loan to get some regular playing time, get some confidence, first team confidence somewhere else, and then return if he does well to compete with Jordi Alba. I think he's got the potential. I think he has all the potential attributes. If we look at the general attributes of his game to become an international top level left back. We have seen better left backs in La Masia before. I think Grimaldo showed more promise back in his day, but he's still an excellent talent, and he's been superb with Spain's under-19s as well. Like at left back, he pretty much took them to the Euros, which is about to start. He made like 4 assists and got 1 penalty and they scored 6 goals, I think, in the final qualifying round. So like he was involved in almost all their goals that took them to the Euros. So he's been excellent this season and should hopefully do well on loan somewhere else. Maybe he would be sold with a buyback clause. I wouldn't mind that either. But in any way, we shouldn't let him go permanently. And I'm sure that the club also knows this.
Yeah, I want to remind people as well that Miranda was on the younger side of this crop of players when we talk about Puig, Oriol, Busquets, et cetera, that not only was he on the younger side, but he was young enough where Barca were still trotting him out in the UEFA Youth League this year. So for those who are out on him, that yes, he had some disappointing performances for the first team, but as you mentioned, the point to his season, it's not all negative. He was very good with Barca B in the 3rd division. He excelled when he was playing in the Youth League and with younger, his age opposition, we'll say, and I think he will continue to get better and improve. And again, he's another one of those where it's all about having minutes to be carved out. And as you mentioned, I think I completely agree that the only way forward, I think, with Barca really going to be looking, I doubt it's Cucurella the way things are going, but if Barca really are looking at another left back, a cheap one, maybe a Felipe Luis, that kind of thing, and a more experienced one, then Miranda has got to go somewhere on loan. And I think he's the perfect guy to go out for a mid-table to top La Liga team that he could find a place in. Obviously, he's from Betis, so we wonder, but they do have Junior Firpo, so we'll say tongue-in-cheek, if Barca are looking at another left back, maybe that, again, that buyback clause might make sense in some kind of, we'll say, a tongue-in-cheek swap type situation. But another guy who might go out on loan, and a guy who, Iñaki Peña, started the year injured, he got healthy. One guy who didn't get healthy for a while because he had a much more devastating injury last season, that was Oriol Busquets, who I think all season long for me, Navid, never really got to full fitness. He got better and better as he was coming back from that injury here in the spring. But again, I don't think we ever saw his best. And unfortunately, I think that puts him a little bit behind as he is basically missed almost a full season of a really, really important part of his development in the time that he has. But I think the future is still bright for him. But again, where did you see his season, having come back from injury, and where do you see him next year?
Yeah, I think he would have progressed so much more, and we would have talked about him in a completely different light if he hadn't been injured for 10 months. I think perhaps his best game of the season was the final away game of the season, where he looked very, very, very solid. But yeah, he took a while to get back to full fitness, and even in some games, Pimienta preferred Monchu Collado and Riqui ahead of him in central midfield. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, he's a very, very gifted talent, and he will spend this summer to get in great shape, and I think he will. I think he'll do well in preseason if he stays at Barca, and I think that if they can find a club for him to go out on loan, he will do decently there as well. Perhaps maybe his own disadvantage is that he's not a good central midfielder, a good interior, but he's a defensive midfielder. So maybe the club will have a bit of a difficult time finding a club that needs a defensive midfielder regularly for him to play. But nevertheless, I don't think we should rule him out. I think he's definitely someone worth keeping an eye on for sure. He physically and technically he's just great. There's nothing really. There's no really big disadvantage for him. I think that perhaps the only thing is that perhaps he's a bit slow, but not like Sergio Busquets slow. For a defensive midfielder, he's very well built physically.
Yeah, and I think due to his being limited in his positioning, that again, this is one of those circumstances where I always think of Sergio Samper as the best example, where he went out on these loans and things just didn't work for him at the clubs that he was at. And so Oriol Busquets is a situation where he goes to a club, let's say they're playing a 4-3-3 or they're playing something with two defensive midfielders, and then they sack their manager. The next guy who comes in plays a flat 4-4-2. That would be my worry, just sending him out on loan, just because as he continues to work his way back from injury, if his talent isn't cultivated by the system that's being played, again, no manager is at the behest of just one player. So that would be my worry about him, but I hope that he would find his way there. Now, the most puzzling of the bunch, where people say that Suarez that we need to get the number 9 position at Barcelona younger, and yet they have Abel Ruiz, who has long been, now we're talking 3, 4, 5 years now, which is a pretty long time for a teenager. He has been the heir apparent for the Spanish youth national teams as the best number 9 in the system. And when Barcelona were able to get him from Valencia quite a few years ago, he came in and was banging in goals. But this last season and a half or so, the goals have kind of dried up as he's a little bit sputtered, I think. But he's one of those guys that his result and his progress, unfortunately, is dictated by his goal scoring. But what did you see from him that gives you promise that he is not just going to be a goal scoring threat, but he's adding different things to his game? Or do you think this was just complete stagnation from Abel Ruiz?
I definitely do not think that it was general stagnation. He's definitely developed throughout the year, matured a lot, physically stronger as well. Physically more adapt to the senior leagues. I think genuinely the only problem is his goal scoring. I mean, he scored 3-4 goals this season, but the problem is the chances that he misses. He has a lot of chances. He has had a lot of chances, a lot of clear ones that he hasn't. Where he hasn't been efficient, and that hits you as a striker. That hits you on your mentality. But I think that he has so much potential. He is extremely good on the ball. He's not slow at all. He can play basically in all 3 positions. I mean, he's also played at right wing. I mean, I think he's the perfect striker. Like for the first team, like stylistically, he's the perfect profile because he can, like if we say Messi plays false 9, which he basically does, like Abel is the perfect wide striker profile-wise. I think that if he had just been effective this season, he would have been a definite new addition to the first team, challenging Suarez. He has a lot of potential, and he's so good. He's such a good teammate. I mean, he creates so much space for his teammates, creates chances for them as well, and it's always. I mean, he's not selfish at all in this game. He genuinely just has to improve on his finishing, and I think that he's a striker that is like he could explode in any minute, but at the same time, there is a window for him to make it at Barca, and if he doesn't score more goals next season, I think that perhaps he will be not sold permanently, but he will have to leave and see if he can generate more goals elsewhere and maybe return. But yeah, I mean, when you're a striker, you have to score goals.
Yeah.
I mean, Benzema, I think he resembles Benzema quite a lot. I mean, he's excellent on the ball, keeping the ball with his back towards the goal, and also being very active in the build-up with superb technique for a 9, and he's a modern striker, not just a poacher, just like Benzema. But yeah, Benzema scores 20 goals a season at least. So Abel has the potential for that. I mean, if he can start next season well, I think he will get more chances with the first team throughout the year if Suarez gets injured or something.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens with the striker market and whatever. But I think that if he starts well next season, we can have some high hopes for him. I hope that he will score goals in the preseason to begin with. Maybe he should stay with Barca B in preseason just to get some goals banging in, like against
for his confidence. Yeah. Yeah,
just for
I
some
think you're
confidence.
onto something there with that. I think unlike the rest that we talked about being ready for the first team, that Abel Ruiz will most likely do preseason with the first team and then be a fixture in Barca B, most likely playing at the number 9 this time around, take over that number 9 from Rafa Mujica this season, for next season rather, for Ruiz. But let's get a little younger here, and I guess we'll pick up the pace a little bit again. We talked about the guys that you could see next season with the first team, so those are the ones we keyed in on. Now, we have the two big stars, I say the ones whose stock rose the most this year, and it was two guys that were also renewed in the last 6 months, their contracts, one just a few weeks ago in Ansu Fati, which for me, Ansu Fati, 20 goals, 9 assists. He was probably Barcelona's best player in the UEFA Youth League this year. He's a left winger, just still 16 years old. And we see that these Premier League clubs and Serie A, La Liga, other teams plot out 16, 17-year-olds. He'll be turning 17 next year. And I think it would show a whole ton of courage, we'll say, from Barcelona. I don't expect much, but he's a guy that will most likely take the jump as a 16-year-old from Juvenil A to Barca B, and he could even potentially make a Copa del Rey appearance or what have you. Again, he's not going to be a La Liga regular, but he could make even a Copa del Rey appearance. I think he's shown that he is that good this season. Ansu Fati, it seems like every time he took on opponents in one-on-one dribbles, he combined well, and most importantly, unlike Abel Ruiz that we've talked about this year, especially in the Youth League, Ansu Fati finished, and that's what he did. He finished, he converted, and he was my rising star this year. And then the other one, Ilaix Moriba, 3 goals, 4 assists, may not tell the whole story. People compare him to Paul Pogba, but he is very much in the Barcelona mold, though. He's very much in the Barcelona system, the way he passes, the way he is patient, and just his physicality and his foraying runs is one that is, again, he was a 15-year-old for most of this season playing with 17-year-olds. That just tells you how good these two guys were at Juvenil A. Moriba will probably stay at Juvenil A. Fati will probably become a Barca B player. Again, that is still less to be known, but these two are my guys, Navid, and I think yours too as well, for the biggest rising stars from La Masia this season.
I think the best Juvenil A player this season has definitely been Ansu Fati. He's actually contradicting to what you said. He hasn't actually renewed yet officially.
No?
There is still some talk going on, and some worry actually that he might demand a bit too much.
Yeah, we got to get that done, Navid. We got to make some calls. We got to get that done.
Yeah, we have to make that because he's been extraordinarily good. I mean, he's okay. So he's this left winger. Let's just say the Neymar type who likes to have the ball a lot and to play on a bit on a slow level, but then suddenly just burst into space and just take on 2, 3, 4 players and do his magic. And as you said, 20 goals and 9 assists for a left winger who is 16 years old, and he was actually 15 to begin with at the season. He turned 16 in October. He's extremely fast. Got so much quality on the ball. He's not 100% two-footed, but he's almost as natural with his left. So he dribbles and shoots extremely well with his left. In many ways, profile-wise, I would compare him with Neymar, that kind of winger. And he scored. People should check out the highlights from Barca's Youth League game against PSV Eindhoven away, where he receives the ball at the middle of the pitch, and then just takes on maybe 3 players, 3.5 players before hitting it in the top corner outside the box. Just an insane goal. So yeah, he's been the best player of the season alongside I would say Ilaix and 2 other players, whom we can talk about later. But Ilaix has also been extremely promising. He started the season out as a Juvenil B player. He was already 1 year younger than the Juvenil B players, and then due to a gap in midfield in Juvenil A, he got some minutes there and just dominated as if there was no difference at all between the teams. He's still a cadet player, and he's actually still a cadet player. He could be. His age is. He was born in 2003.
Right.
That's the Xavi Simons generation. Like that's the Cadet A generation, and he's been playing against players in youth league, in UEFA Youth League, who are born in 1999. So that's 4 years older than him, and he's been dominating in the Youth League, where he scored a goal against Hertha Berlin in the round of 16 to take Barca to the quarterfinals. Unfortunately, he got injured and he couldn't play the semifinals. Neither could he play he couldn't play the semifinals, and he couldn't play the under 17 Euros for Spain either. So that was a bit of a shame. That ruined his brilliant season. And for both, and stylistically, I mean, some people compare him with Pogba because he's pretty tall, physical, but still very technically gifted. And he, like I myself, I tweeted a video of some of his most spectacular long shots because he's so good from outside the box. He's very dangerous, and he has a great weapon of a right foot. And the thing about Ilaix and Ansu Fati, other than actually they're also best friends. They hang out a lot with each other. They go to first team games at Camp Nou with each other, and actually, and Ilaix officially has renewed. I think it was there were rumors that he became the most expensive youth player ever at La Masia. And now there's doubt if he's going to play with Barca B next season or going to continue with Juvenil A with some appearances for Barca B. And I think we have to just wait and see. But perhaps Barca B's midfield next season could be a bit stacked. So unless he just proves himself better than all the other players, perhaps he would play a bit more with Juvenil A this season.
Yeah.
But he's also been extremely good and very, very promising.
Yeah, I mean, there's the fact that we're talking about him potentially going to play for Barca B where he would be playing as a 16-year-old, as you mentioned. He turned 16 this year in January. That's why they were able to wrap. That's why it was necessary to get him to be renewed, because he was turning 16 for that professional contract, as Man City and everyone else were calling.
And he was so close to joining. It was Chelsea who was so close to joining in the end. So it's super important that we got him to stay. And just the fact that we're talking about him as a potential B player next season is just unusual for a 16-year-old. We have to go back to Alex Grimaldo. He debuted for the B team as a 15-year-old and was a regular at 16, 17 before he got injured. And we haven't seen that since. So it's pretty unusual.
So now I think, Navid, it's a moment where there were a few guys who we already knew were going to be pretty good that I just want to list a few names, and both Juvenil A and Juvenil B players. Nicky Gonzalez, a Juvenil A midfielder. Alejandro Marquez, who people would have known was he had a brace in the UEFA Youth League win last season alongside Puig and Callado and the rest. He had 19 goals this season between Juvenil A and Barcelona B. Juan with 24 goals, the Juvenil B striker. I believe he got... There is no golden boot in La Masia, but I believe that he was the one who captured that. Jandro Oriana, the defensive midfielder who played between the Juvenil A. He played in the Youth League, and he played some for Barcelona B as well. Again, he's a defensive midfielder. And then, for me, the guy that rose the most is a right-back in Sergi Rosanas, who I didn't really even know his name at the start of this season, and he's come along being the UEFA Youth League right back and also excelling at the Juvenil A level. And then you had Conrad De La Fuente, who's now playing for the U.S., played for the U.S. U20s at the World Cup. He had 4 goals, 6 assists, doesn't really have 2 feet, but he is very, very deadly as a winger on 1 foot, but again, I think he needs to develop his second foot a little bit more. And then we have the whole batch of Cadet A players, which you can go to barcablog.com, and if you type in La Masia Profiles, just go to the tab, and I previewed a ton of Cadet A players this season. So of that whole bunch, including the Cadet A players, Navid, I'm going to ask you for 3 of those names. Again, I didn't name any Cadet A players, but if I want to include that whole group in here, just give me 3 names that really, really impressed you this year.
Okay, so I'll start with a Juvenil A player that you didn't mention. His name is Arnau Tenas, and he is their goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Arnau Tenas, actually, I mentioned before that Iñaki Peña is quite small for a goalkeeper. Arnau Tenas is actually smaller, and but still, it's incredible how we've managed to get two such brilliant goalkeepers with 1 year apart through the academy. He is a superbly he's a superb shot stopper. His reflexes on the line are incredible. I watched the Juvenil A play against Real Madrid in the League Winners' Cup quarterfinal, which they unfortunately lost, but we won't talk about that. But he had this incredible save off a free kick, which was crossed into the box, and he had maybe 1.5 meter to react to a header, which was I mean, he hit it well, and he had to move and react for it, and he got a hand on the ball, and it was an incredible save, and yeah, he was also very good in the youth league. Had a couple of controversial moments in the final, but also some amazing saves. He's a bit of a madman, actually. He's extremely passionate, and he wants to play the ball out with his feet at all costs. But he's not as good on the feet as Iñaki Peña. Maybe actually on the ball, maybe one can compare him with Pinto, actually, just for the lulz, because he wants to play a lot out on the back, out from the back. But sometimes he doesn't have the ability, but still tries, and it looks a bit funny. But I mean, he has risen a lot. He's also trained in some periods of the season. He trained regularly with the first team as well, which is extremely impressive for a 17-year-old goalkeeper, I would say, and it's very unusual. But he was good enough for it, and he must have impressed Valverde's staff. He was training alongside Iñaki Peña and Ter Stegen when Silesen was injured throughout the season, and he's been very good. I've been very happy with his development this season, and I think that if Iñaki Peña leaves Barca B next season, he will compete with Sadevic in goal, and I think that he will at some point knock off Sadevic, who is a bit older than him. So he's been a big not even a big surprise, because he was very good before. He was a Spain international as well, and he's gonna represent Spain. He's gonna start for Spain at the under-19 Euros alongside teammates such as Miranda and Leandro Oriana and Abel Ruiz and Alejandro Marquez. And yeah, he's been very good. If I have to move away from Juvenil A for a second, I would say, okay, one player for Juvenil B, and then perhaps one player for Cadet A.
Yeah, that works.
That would work. Yeah, Juvenil B, I would say the main player for Juvenil B this season has definitely been Jaume Jardi.
Yeah.
He has been the most scoring player in La Masia this season, alongside Cadet A's Leo Dos Reis. They both scored 24 goals this season. Jaume Jardi he's a wide striker. He's been playing different positions because their coach Fran Artiga is extremely experimental. Sometimes he plays 3 at the back, sometimes he plays 4. He constantly moves around his strikers. Sometimes he plays Jardi as a right winger. Sometimes he plays him as a right forward. Sometimes he plays him as a striker. So he's been playing all these positions. He's left-footed. He has perhaps the best left foot in La Masia. Extremely explosive left foot. He scored some bangers throughout the season, and although he hasn't been picked for any Spanish national teams, he's definitely one to keep an eye out for. He has been picked before, but not this season for Spain's youth internationals, and they should notice him next season. He will definitely play for Juvenil A, and they will probably need him because they're going to lose 2 of their best players for most of the season. Alejandro Marquez and Ansu Fati, even Conrad de la Fuente is probably going to be with Barca B for most of next season, at least some of it. So Jardi is going to play an important role to Juvenil A's attack next season, and I hope that he continues to do as well as he has done. He's also just a great kid. He's very reserved, but extremely passionate on the pitch. So he's one to look out for. For Cadet A, I'm going to have to go with Alejandro Balde.
The left back, yeah.
Yeah, the left back. And actually, he hasn't even been with Cadet A for a lot of the season because he was promoted to Juvenil B. But I'm going to count him in anyways because he has been the most prolific Cadet A player this season. He came back from an ACL tear at the beginning of the season, and like one wouldn't even notice that he has had an ACL tear. He returned and he was just. I mean, I definitely think that he's the best left back in La Masia. When he was at the same age as Juan Miranda, I would say that he is a better player than Miranda was at the time. So I hope that he can continue because first of all, I think he's one of the fastest players in the academy at all.
Yep.
And at the same time, he has so much quality on the ball. So he is very dangerous. And just he's been so solid. He went up and played for Juvenil B against kids 2 years older than him. No, even sometimes he's played against kids 4 years older than him, just like Ilaix at juvenile level. So he's impressed, and it's good to see that we've been so good at developing left backs in the past years. Alejandro Grimaldo. There was also I forgot his name, but he ended up playing in La Liga as well. And then Cucurella, Juan Miranda now, and after him, a couple of years between him and Balde. But it's good to see that left back is the position where La Masia is competing with the best. So yeah, those three I would say has risen quite a lot this season. There obviously are also other players worth mentioning.
Yeah, and as we've gone through all these names, I want to remind people as well that I don't remember the exact number, but I believe it was somewhere in the 60s, 66-ish, 68, something like that. There were that number of new players came to La Masia last season. Cadet A had Xus Alba was one that I think of. And so there's going to be this summer plenty of turnover. You're going to see a lot of names that we had mentioned in the past. I even did a La Masia profile a few weeks ago about Mateo Mori, who for a long, long time was, along with Abel Ruiz, starring for the Spanish youth national teams, and it seems like he's going to be at Borussia Dortmund next season. He came from Mallorca in 2015, again, was one of the shining stars at La Masia every season as he made progress up through, but he basically was out all season long through injury, and apparently it was asking a little too much from Barcelona, so he will be heading out now. So a guy who probably should have been the starter for Barca B at right back next year will be heading out if Molaaghaei is indeed going to be with the first team. That does already kind of leave a little bit of a hole at the Barca B, and they'll fill with either, with the lower levels, or we'll see if they bring somebody in. So, as I said, there's still going to be a lot of movement in La Masia over the course of the summer. And I think for me, Mateo Mori is that scenario where we were hyping a guy for a long, long time, and just due to injury or, again, due to even contract breaking down, he winds up not being the future of Barcelona, and he winds up never even being close to the first team. And these things do happen, and these are things that you recognize that as much as we talk about Ansu Fati or Moriba, that it may never happen at Barcelona, but again, we put hope that it will, and we hope that that progress is a linear progress for these players. Now, the thing we're going to end this show with, Navid, is another one of those, again, negative stories, maybe for La Masia, but again, maybe just a sad story, is that a few years ago when that FIFA ban happened, again, we all remember it well, the first team survived, if you will, because Luis Suarez and Ter Stegen, that was that summer when they were signed in preparation of the ban, and Barca wins a treble, so we all kind of forget that the academy was affected in the way that it was. And Pep Segura always likes to say that the academy was deeply affected by this, and that's why there seems to be a little bit of we'll say a blip of a talent even with the Juvenil A players, where they lost a lot of players with an exodus. Pablo Moreno, who's with Juventus this season, and well, as what have you, that players were lost even back then. One of those players that was forced to go back to his native Japan was Takefusa Kubo, who has been playing for FC Tokyo, went from the youth leagues for them, and then came up through and was playing this season now as a full professional, as just a 17-year-old. He will be featuring with Japan at the Copa America, so that will be the first time he will, let's say, be seen by an international audience, where people really get a look at this mercurial 17-year-old talent. Now, he was a Barcelona player, and for years now, it's been said that he wanted to return to Barcelona. It seemed like every time he spoke about it still very highly, that that's where he wanted to return. And even months ago, it appeared that he would, when he turned 18 and he was allowed to, he would finally come back, play for Barca B, and maybe get into the first team eventually. Now, that story has completely turned on its head, Navid, and this has been a bugaboo, we'll say, for you over the past few weeks, and I just want you to shed a little more light on this, and if Barcelona do indeed miss out, because, again, he's being linked with Bayern Munich, PSG, Chelsea, Real Madrid, everybody. If Barcelona do miss out on this talent, a talent that was once theirs, what does that say about Barcelona's ability to negotiate and have a relationship with former La Masia players?
I mean, it would just prove the absolute shambles that this both the La Masia direction and the general Barca board is, because the only reason that he's not returning just like automatically to Barca after the club has been in contact with him for years. They've been scouting him ever since he left, ever since he was forced to leave because of the club's actions. The only reason that this isn't just a given is because he's been so good in the Japanese league this season. I mean, just for starters, he's just turned 18, but since he was 15, he's been playing with senior players in senior leagues, in the lower Japanese leagues for FC Tokyo's reserves. And then 1 year ago, he was loaned out because he couldn't get regular minutes for the first team. I mean, he was 16 years old. So he was loaned out to another first division team in Japan in the same league as FC Tokyo. And he was quite impressive with Yokohama Maritimers, I think it was. He was quite impressive. There was even one game where he really stood out against Andres Iniesta's Vissel Kobe, where he actually scored a long shot, like just in front of Iniesta. It was very symbolic in a way. But yeah, so he returned to FC Tokyo in January for the start of the Japanese league. And so FC Tokyo are first in the league. They only lost one game, and Take has been their best player. At 17 years old, he's played on the wing in the 4-4-2, both on left wing and right wing, and he's been absolutely unstoppable. He's had 10 or 11 goals and assists already, and yeah, he has deserved a call up to the Japan senior national team when he should have been playing with Japan's under-20s at the under-20 World Cup.
Exactly.
He's now going to play with their senior national team at the Copa America, where I hope that he can impress. But the only reason that he hasn't returned to Barca like automatically is that he's been so good that all European clubs have now noticed him and are now offering him great contracts. And he also switched agents recently. He now has two agents, if I'm not mistaken, and they have the demands that they have because of the massive interest. They have hired their demands, and the reports have said that Barca have, for now, they have they've rejected the demands and they've given up on him for now. There hasn't been made any deal yet with any other club as far as the reports go, but he might be close to PSG. I think the rumor was that PSG is the club most closely linked with him. But
yeah, who knows on that?
So let's just. So what are these demands? Is he expecting to get as much playing time as Leo Messi next season for the first team when he was supposed to be with Barca B?
Yeah.
Does he want an extreme amount of money? Whatever. No, not really. The only demand is that they want a 5-year contract and they want a salary of €1 million per year. It's a lot for an 18-year-old. In context, it's 200,000 euros less than Malcolm's salary. So comparing with a player in his positions, 4 or 5 years older than him.
Yeah. I also want to add a little context too. That yes, football is a business, and there is some cynicism to that. But I think the cynical view you must take as well. That I think Kubo's people know that because he is a Japanese player, and you look at the Asian market, that he, in terms of marketability, a Japanese Barcelona player, you can't tell me that jersey will not make up, or all the, not even jersey, but because obviously a lot of that goes to the kit manufacturers as well. But you can't tell me that the marketability of that kind of player, a Japanese Barcelona player, will not make up that bottom line very quickly. I mean, there's a cynical reason why Barcelona went after Brazilians in the way that they did in terms of Coutinho and Paulinho and you name it, guys that probably shouldn't, that, you know, there were better picks, and yet a Brazilian showed up at Barcelona. I mean, maybe even Malcolm to a degree, that, you know, they know that there's marketability with Brazilian players, and in an Asian market that Kubo would certainly make up some of that. We'll say if he's asking too much, his star power would certainly make up for that.
Yeah, and Barca's main sponsor is Japanese.
Exactly.
And Barca doing preseason in Japan this summer. Yep. It's just a perfect. From a cynical marketing perspective, it's just a perfect opportunity for the club. Symbolically is also perfect because they can get one of the kids that FIFA forced to leave La Masia and leave
right.
Spain and leave Europe to go back. They can get him back. And the fact of the matter is that actually he's just too good for Barca B. I mean, he shouldn't be playing in Segunda B next season. He's too good for that. He's proven himself on a way too high level for that already. I mean, he's playing in front of 40,000-50,000 people a week, and he's already a sensation in Japan. He's been so for years now, but now he's a senior player, and so he's actually an icon already. I mean, he got his full national debut, was it yesterday, and he was brilliant. I mean, Immediately he came on and he almost scored, and he took on quite a lot of players. There was one instant on the right wing where he got past one player who fell down on his knees for him, and then he nutmegged the next player in line. And he's very, very special, and I don't believe for a second that Barca aren't able to pay 1 million player for such a 1 million euro for such a player, and if he's too good for Barca B, and if there's not enough room for him on the first team, I mean, loan him out. I mean, he just has to return to the club. I mean, it's absolutely unacceptable. I would say, like, from all perspectives, like sporting wise, symbolically, financially. It's a great opportunity that the club would be very, very stupid to miss out on this. And I really hope that he can show some promise at Copa America, and then the board will be like, oh, this guy, we didn't even know him. Oh, look, he can actually play on a higher level, so he would be worth this amount. Let's just pay it. There was a journalist, Josep Capdevila, who covers La Masia for Sport. He's been very close with Take throughout the years. He's also a senior reporter, so he was a La Masia reporter when Take was at the club from 2011 to 2014, and he wrote that a couple of months ago, actually, he wrote that Take he only wanted to return to Barca. I mean, Barca was the only choice for him. Because he just wants to return, and I just have to emphasize that for years now, since he left in 2014, almost every year he has returned to Barcelona just to be with his old teammates and to to train with them during Christmas break and just to hang out with them. I mean, he really misses his teammates and misses the club. So there would be absolutely no issue at all getting him back. They just have to pay a measly price of €1 million a month for him. And I mean, I think that he would do so well that he would want to get his contract renewed after a couple of seasons. I mean, he has been a spectacular. He has shown spectacular talent for a 17-year-old. I don't think there's been any better 17-year-olds this spring, actually. And I think if there was room in the first team, I think maybe even there would be an opportunity for him to do a Vinicius, spend a couple of months with the B team, and just improve game to game, get used to the system, and then get so good that the first team coach can't ignore him anymore.
Yep.
And then he gets minutes, and then he just impresses everyone, and then everyone just say, "Oh, he's completely worth this money because now we can see that he can play on this level."
Yeah.
It's very typical for young players. Young players demanding a lot of money. People are a bit unsure if they're worth it. Like we saw it with Mbappe as well, like 160 whatever million and such a high wage, and then he had a good World Cup and showed immense quality at PSG and whatever, and people were like, that's cheap for such a good player just because he's 19. Or Matthijs de Ligt as well, he's demanding a lot of money, he's 19. People are like, oh, he's a money grabber and whatever, but he's also already one of the best centre backs in the world. I think I think 1 million for a player like Take Kubo per year is not a problem. Shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it is a business. As I said, these players, even at 16, I mean, you don't know with injury. And we talked about, again, with Mori having that long-term injury that instead of getting this huge Barcelona contract, he's, the club is now telling him because of that injury he's worth less than he thought he was. And so these players, before they get, there's a lot of what ifs. So even at a young age, they're trying to get as much money they can to provide for themselves forever as professional athletes at any juncture. And that is the cynical business part of this. And it is a weird spot when we talk about La Masia as we wrap this show up. It's a weird spot to be when you're talking about big money like that, and then you're also talking about teenagers. And you realize that, football is a business, unfortunately, that is affecting teenagers. And it is a weird place to be as we try to have these conversations about these guys that are, again, they can't drink or whatever in certain countries, and some of them can't even drive in certain countries yet. And yet, we're talking about millions of euros when talking about what these players are worth as athletes. And so I think just like Kubo, I saw a ton of different reactions to him and whether or not he's worth it or not. And I guarantee you so many of those people have never seen him play. And that is the case with these La Masia players. So I urge you, as Navid always says, there is stuff out there now in the digital age that we live in. Every player we named, they're going to all be in the show notes. Every guy that I've named, that Navid named, go check them out. Go watch the highlight packages and understand that the highlight packages don't tell the whole story, but also recognize that there is potential and there's a reason why, again, we leave the heavy lifting to people like Navid to watch all the matches for us, let us know which players impress over the 90 minutes, and then again, see the highlight packages yourself, get excited about these players and hope that Barcelona take care of them financially in the end and let all that business stuff to them.
Yeah, and I mean, there was one guy who argued against getting Take back on the argument. I think it's a fair argument that if you sign youth players, for example, B players, like worth that much, and give them that much in salary, other potential B players, Barca youth players and whatnot, they would also start demanding a lot more. And of course, that would be a negative effect. But I mean, we're already seeing Ansu Fati and Ilaix, and I mean Riqui Puig also last season. I mean, they want guarantees, and money comes with that as well, because I mean, they know what they're worth, And
yep.
but of course, this won't be an issue at all if you don't make him a Barca B player. There won't be this gap between him and the other Barca B players if he's not a Barca B player. And frankly, he's too good to play in Segunda Division, Segunda B. I mean, the offers that he's getting from around, like from PSG and Dortmund and Real Madrid and Chelsea and whatever. I mean, the offers are for the first teams. So I have no idea why Barca still see him as a potential B player. I know he has to be patient and and all that when he's actually good enough to play for elite European clubs.
Well, unlike some other clubs, Barcelona have still a ton of work to do this summer. We'll be following all that news. Again, continue to check out. We have weekly podcasts coming out. There's stuff going on not only with the Women's World Cup, as well as with the Copa America. The U20 World Cup just finished up, so there's so much football going on. It is not about FC Barcelona, but before you know it, they're going to be starting their preseason, and we're going to be talking to Navid again about La Masia and previewing next season as well. And Navid, thanks so much for joining the show and just providing all the knowledge that you have. Again, I wish that these were, when we talk about La Masia, I wish we had 3-4 hours to do these, but again, I just try to finish it in about an hour. Navid, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me, Dan, and I'm looking forward to talk to you again next season.
And thanks so much to you, the listeners, for tuning in again. You can tap in your app and check out the show notes to subscribe. You can also find us on social media, and again, also hit Navid's name in the show notes. Again, he is one of those guys, along with the @YoungKool-Aids, that you certainly want to follow for La Masia news. He is one of the leading voices. That's why I have him on the show, and that's why he's such a terrific expert. We're also on Twitter ourselves, @the_Barcelona_Pod, or @HiltonD13 for me, on Instagram, @the_Barcelona_Pod. Our closed Facebook group is tbpod.link/group for deeper dives and discussions. You also help us out on Patreon. I just did a UEFA Nations League review because Nelson Semedo, Jasper Silverson, Frank de Jong all played in that game. And we can continue making these shows if you help us out at tbpod.link/Patreon. We're also on YouTube now. I'm going to have something about La Masia based on this conversation later this week or next. You can check that out on YouTube. Hit subscribe, like, comment, do all that, and help us out. And again, the subscription button is right there as well. You have a lot of summer reading to do as well. We did La Masia profiles on a lot of these guys, so check out the La Masia profile tab. That will be down in the show notes as well. It is a jam-packed show notes, a lot of reading and a lot of listening. So you've done all that. Thanks so much for getting to the end of this show. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Força Barça.
Força.